Welcome back to the Scorpio Bookshelf. I'm Joaquin.
And I'm Morgan, and this is a podcast about books, besties, and escaping reality.
Fun episode today.
We are going to be yapping at you all about audiobooks.
Yeah, audiobooks are sometimes controversial, and that's kind of what we're going to jump into right away, to be honest. Get that right off our plates, right off our chests, and see where we stand. So,
let's preface this by saying that Joaquin and I are both audiobook people. We are both avid Libby users. We currently share an Audible account.
Whether we're allowed to or not, we do.
And we both frequently listen to audiobooks. I am typically someone who has an ebook or a physical book and an audiobook on the go at all times.
I like to stick to one book at a time, but as of right now, I'm reading 5 audiobooks at one time.
LOL.
Yeah. So that's not typically like me, but it is happening.
We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to pretend that is mentally okay, but it's not.
Depends on the day, depends on the time of, situation, whatever.
So let's start off right with just the most controversial topics surrounding audiobooks, and that's, are audiobooks considered reading?
I'm just going to say it because it's easier. Yeah. And I don't have any tangible points that make it true or can sway you, really. I just think of it as, well, it's easy, and you're taking in a story. So, sure.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to say that, well, yes, I do think it is reading. I think in the last 5 years, reading has become a different term than the act to read. So
Okay.
The hobby of reading includes audiobooks. The act of reading is with your eyeballs. So you can be a reader and listen to audiobooks, but to listen to an audiobook is not to read words on a page.
Okay.
So it's not that I don't agree that it's reading. I think it is. As a hobby, listening to audiobooks is reading. You are still a reader. At the end of the day, you're taking in the story. You can answer the same questions as someone who read the book. But it's not reading with your eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's the argument. I think a lot of people's argument is trying to devalue audiobooks in some sort of way. I disagree with that. I think they have the same value as reading the book with your eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
I just think the term reading has shifted a lot in the last, maybe even decade, but I've only started listening to audiobooks more recently than that. So I think the actual hobby of reading, the term reader, that includes audiobooks without a doubt in my mind. But the act of reading, to read, the verb in the English language, does not include audiobooks, because then you are listening, not reading.
Right.
But that is to say, without disvaluing audiobooks. I love audiobooks. I still think you read the book. I still think you can mark it as read on Goodreads. I still think if you can answer the same questions as if you read it with your eyeballs, you read the fucking book.
Right. That makes sense.
So it's kind of a double-edged argument. Do I think that it's reading with your eyeballs? No. Do I think that you still count as having read the book? Yes.
I guess, okay, yeah, I guess you could say you didn't read, right? You didn't read with your eyeballs. You didn't read, but you consumed a book. I guess you could just say you consumed the story. And it is really difficult because people can say the argument of, if they're listening to this right now, are you reading right now because you're listening to it?
It's a dumbass argument.
Because we don't have a story. We're not authors. We're just yapping out of our assholes. People would be like, are you listening to the news? And does that count as reading or whatever? It's like, those arguments just don't.
That's why I think the nuance of the argument is that, no, obviously you're not reading with the sense of the verb to read with your eyeballs. Obviously not, because you're not. You're listening. But you are reading the book, as in you are a reader consuming the story from the book.
Right.
It gets me fired up when people say discount it as if you didn't consume the book.
Right.
It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Does it not count if somebody read the book to you?
That's what I was thinking, because I was like, as a kid, you couldn't read and you had story time. That's considered your reading time. You couldn't. And I would just choose to be more efficient with it because I would like to care for a child while I'm doing something, or going on a run, or commuting and motion sickness kicks in, I need to listen to a book because I can't.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, I mean, we agree here. You're consuming the book, you're consuming the story, you understand the plot line, you understand the characters. The outcome is no different than if you opened it physically and read it with your eyeballs.
Right.
So you still read the fucking book. But the people who want to argue, it's not reading an internet, are the people who say dumb shit like, well, do you read the news? Like, no, you watched it or you listened to it. That's a stupid question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Those people are funny.
It's nuance. It's a classic English language, stupid conversation.
Mm-hmm. Just bottom line, you're taking in information, whether you read it on your own or not. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're a university student and you record yourself like reading the material. I know a lot of people do that to learn and listen back. Are you no longer learning the information because you're listening to it back? You only learned it the first time you spoke it out loud? No, obviously not.
Yeah, this is a weird gray area.
So at the end of the day, if you can answer what the plotline of the book was, how it ended up, you read the fucking book.
I mean, honestly, I could read a physical and somebody could ask me all those questions and I still wouldn't fucking understand because I'm the type of reader who, once the last page is turned, the entire story's out the door. Yep.
Bye.
I guess that leads us into what makes audiobooks good.
Number one for me is narration. Number one, the person reading the book has to be a good speaker, have a decent pace, all of those sorts of things that go along with the actual listening experience. Those are more important to me.
Yeah, I agree. I have listened to audiobooks for a little bit more, I guess, indie authors or really new books, and the author hasn't chosen the most prolific narrator, and they have not established their narration style. It just doesn't fit. And you can tell it's like, oh, maybe they were saving a little bit of money on that because it is expensive out here to do these things, to produce these things. But then they maybe redo it, or they change narrators in the second book if it's a series, and it just hits, and you're like, oh, you did it. You found it, and now I'm hooked with the series because the narrator is so great.
Yeah, I think there's definitely audiobooks that I have listened to that I would not have liked if I had just read them outright.
Me too.
Or would not have liked as much, at least. I think a good point to make here is that we need to remember how horrendously expensive audiobooks are to make for authors, especially indie authors.
Yeah.
We out here criticize narration, whatever, while also fully understanding that it is a privilege to be able to afford to have an audiobook made of your book. And sometimes budgets don't allow for the best production, the best narrator, the best whatever. But audiobooks are also an accessibility thing. So having an audiobook at all is still amazing. That being said, there are still things that give us the ick.
Oh, yep. I'm trying to think of them, because I know I have them. Off the top of my head, when they include the mouth noises...
That was exactly what I was about to say. That was exactly what I was about to say.
Because, like, you'll be in such an intense moment, and all of a sudden you hear... And you're like...
If I can hear your saliva, I'm DNFing. This is not a mukbang.
Oh. And that just makes me... If I hear it, I automatically go, ooh, moist. Moist mouth. Bye.
You just know they're sitting there recording, their mouth is so dry that they're like... trying to get their...
No, I'm going to edit this and be like... Bleh.
I'm going to skip past this part when I'm reviewing it later this week.
Oh my god.
So now that was disgusting for all of you, mouth noises. It gives me the ick in real life. It gives me the ick in audio as well. I have not come across very many where that happens, but when it does, it makes me want to crawl out of my skin and die.
Yeah. And the rest is not... I don't even really have that many other ones. It's more based off of what the author actually wrote, which when they're saying it out loud makes me feel weird or icky, versus... if I was just read it in my head, fair. I would have just gone right by it. So that's like pretty universal, I think, of an experience with everybody.
So I was going to say my other ick is when you're listening to an audiobook that has spicy scenes.
Yeah.
And the narrator is putting a little too much into it. You feel me? Like... If you're moaning through your sentence, I am a little uncomfortable. But not just like, you know what I mean? Not just like a standard... I don't know if you've ever come across this because you're not a big spice reader. There is a certain, and I'm not going to call it out because I don't want to get shivved, but there is a certain audiobook that I did really enjoy outside of a specific spice scene, because the narration was so, for lack of a better word, graphic, that I actually ended up skipping forward because I was like, ew, I feel like I'm intruding on someone else's personal time.
Holy crap.
And you know me. I'm a spice girl.
I know.
So...
because I'm trying to think about it right now, and if we're really just mashing up all of our different points for this podcast as a whole, the best and worst stuff, the one that I just finished reading... was so great. The intensity of the characters and the dual narration was amazing.
Okay,
but even if there was a point in it where it was just like...
yeah, so let's pause for a second. We get the icks for some things, obviously. A lot of it has to do with what's actually written on the page, not the narrator themselves. What makes good audiobooks? What makes a strong audiobook that you're like, damn, I'm glad I listened to this instead of read it?
So I think it's a little bit of a line because you listen to audiobooks at like 2.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
That's a whole other conversation.
Because I listen to them at 1. I'm not... depends on what I'm doing, but I'll listen to them at regular 1 time speed. What makes them great for me is what you mentioned before. So pacing, enunciation, timing of specific emphases on words.
That was English.
Yeah, I'm not from here.
I'm not from here.
Let's just get that straight. I was abducted as a child and brought here by my parents. Anyways. So...
I'm dead.
So, okay, let me just pull us from the example.
Okay,
I finished... Okay.
Let's pause for half a second.
Let's repause the pause.
We're gonna repause the pause. We're play on the last pause and pausing again. Anyways, what I was gonna say is that, yes, I am someone who listens to audiobooks at 2 to 2.5 times speed as a standard. Unless I am driving, then I listen to it at 1.75.
Oh.
Because my brain is incredibly neurodivergent. I have a very, very hard time focusing if I don't have to think about what's being said. So I need it to be fast enough that it forces my brain to process the information, or I can listen to a whole 12-hour audiobook and not even tell you the main character's name. It has to be fast enough for me to keep my attention on lock.
Interesting. I'm the opposite. Unless I'm immersive reading, I can't.
Immersive reading is a whole different story. We'll bring that up in a moment.
Yeah, I can't. One is enough for me because if it goes too fast, I immediately go white noise. I tune it out.
Fair.
So it needs to be intense and ear catching for me.
I think a really interesting point to note here is that if you think about the speed at which I talk and the speed at which Joaquin talks, this tracks.
Yes, but you enunciate and I mumble.
Which is how our brains work. Your brain goes mumble if you talk any faster. And my
guess
brain
that's
goes
true.
dead if I try and talk any slower. If I'm listening to an audiobook and the narrator is going at this speed,
That's very exaggerated.
I will kill myself.
Okay. Well. YouTube explicit content filter, here I come.
Check.
But so I just finished Leather and Lark. That was my most recent fully finished audiobook. And
fire audiobook.
Fucking fantastic. So the fact that it's amazing at 2.5 and 1 is a huge range of listeners that'll still find it amazing. Because if there was a guy who spoke at 1 and it sounds like absolute dial-up at 2.5, it's not going to be good for people like you. And vice versa. So with the dual narration, the male narrator, I don't know his name off the top of my head.
Is it Eric Nolan? No.
I don't know. Either way, his intensity, his enunciation, the fact that his character had an accent, which I believe he also had that accent, like that's just him. It fit so well. His intensity, like it was chef's kiss. It was just done so well.
Eric Nolan. And he doesn't have an accent. That's
So then he's just a god.
Yeah, he's great.
And for female narrators in spicy books, I have a little bit of a higher bar when it comes to them, because if I don't like their voice...
Oh, just kidding. He is Irish. Okay. You're right. Sorry.
If I have just the bar for my female is because if it's weird when they start talking spicy scenes.
I just need to put out there that Eric Nolan's Instagram for his audiobook narration stuff is the Devil of Dublin.
That fits so well.
And I need you to see what he looks like, just because.
For some reason, even before you show me, I think he looks like Magneto and X-Men and the newer ones. What's his name? Not sure.
I'm blanking, but you're going to be shocked.
He looks like the Temu version of Noah Khan.
No! He looks like a Viking.
He does.
He's also an actor, so that's interesting. But he is the narrator for Leather and Lark and Scythe and Sparrow.
Bryn Weaver knows how to pick her narrators, though.
She does. She really does. Because he's amazing. And there's also a dichotomy in the characters. Like, you can tell they're different characters. Even though they're both Irish men and he narrates them both.
I haven't listened to the one yet, though, so yeah.
True, but I can distinctly tell the difference. Like, Fionn is a different sound, which is cool.
Lachlan.
I love Lachlan.
I do love Lachlan a lot.
So much.
That was so good.
You're gonna love Fionn as well, but anyway.
I just love all the brothers, period. They're just great.
All of the Kane brothers.
Yeah.
So now that we're on the topic of phenomenal audiobooks, there is another one that is one of my top reads of last year that Joaquin is currently reading, or listening to, as it were. And
I have 5, so.
Lights Out by Navessa Allen.
Oh, yeah.
Jacob motherfucking Morgan is a king for this audiobook. Don't get me wrong. He is amazing in a whole bunch of other things, but this fucking audiobook changed my life. I read the physical book of this book and went back and listened to the audiobook and then immersive read it because I loved it so. I read it 3 times.
Jesus. No. So, comparing and contrasting Eric Nolan and Jacob Morgan. Josh is the main character's name. That's why.
Yep.
They're so great, but in 2 different ways. Mm-hmm. The intensity of Lachlan and Leather and Lark was why I loved it. He was growly. He was kind of scary. Yeah. Josh in Lights Out has that level. And even Tyler said it in the book. He makes a joke out of everything, even though he's so intense in a different way. The way that Jacob Morgan, I feel like, read the book, studied what the character should be or had like a really great understanding of it to be able to change and intonate his voice really well in the sarcastic moments are so good.
I feel like you feel like Jacob Morgan is Josh.
I couldn't even tell if I was just like sitting here right now. I could just be like, yep.
Like, it's one of those things where the person, or the voice in this case, fits the character so atrociously well that there's no... It's like, you don't think of Daniel Radcliffe as anything but Harry Potter. Jacob Morgan is Josh for me. Even though he's narrated other audiobooks that I like, that is where my brain goes when I think of Jacob Morgan, is Lights Out Josh. Also, Elena Wolf, who plays the female main character in the audiobook, is phenomenal as well. They're just such a good duet narration. Their chemistry together. I don't know if they recorded together in tandem or on their own. If they recorded on their own, they are magical.
It's phenomenal. There's nothing better. That's like 10 out of 5 on the scale. Like,
Nevessa Allen, Bryn Weaver knows how to pick him. Nevessa Allen is magical.
Yeah.
I'm excited to listen to Kings of Kearney, which is one of her motorcycle dark romance books that just came out in audio form, because if Homegirl picks it as well as she did for Lights Out, that audiobook is going to be incredible again.
So good.
So out of this, we both like duet narration.
Yes. I can't stand when a male tries to do a female voice and a female tries to do a male voice. It doesn't hit. It feels weird. It feels awkward for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Like the basic Fourth Wing audio, where she's trying to be like Zayden and she's all like, I'm like, nah, no, it's not. That's not my shadow daddy. So.
I feel like I'm someone who prefers in audiobooks, if it's not going to be a duet narration, or it's going to be like the female reads the female chapters, the male reads the male chapters, don't try and do voices. Like, just read your shit. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to try and be a dude. It's first-person perspective from the female perspective.
However you hear them.
Say it like you're recounting a story to your friend, not like you're trying to be the other character, because that's not your job at that point.
Yeah. There are tiers to this. So, yes, single narrator, dual narrator. Then there's, like, graphic audios, which obviously is something we'll talk about after.
Full cast narration as well, which is in between dual and graphic audio. You don't have the background stuff of graphic audio, but it's more than just a duet narration.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So I will say, I have read a couple of really fantastic full cast audiobooks. The Guest List by Lucy Foley.
Yes. I remember listening to that.
Every wedding guest is a different voice. I don't know if they're all different people. They could certainly be the same voice actor doing different female and male voices, but they each have their own voice. And Daisy Jones and the Six.
Right. You did tell me about that. I was listening to it. It did have different voices. It was great. I just couldn't continue it because I had other things going on, but it was a good listen.
So Daisy Jones is one of those audiobooks that I don't think I would have appreciated the physical book.
Me too.
Because it's very, like, personal narration of life events. It's fictional, but it's very, like, personal narration of things that are going on in those people's lives. So that feels like it would be kind of iffy for me as an eyeball read, but listening to the full cast of that was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Graphic audios. Let's just go there.
I haven't read a lot of them. I only have read the Fourth Wing graphic audio. And that was so good with the sound effects, the ambiance, the voices, the omnidirectional sounds were great. I remember when the fiance was listening to it in the car and I went, oh, you're listening to the Fourth Wing audio? And I didn't know it was the graphic audio. And the beginning where Violet's outside the door of the office and they're like knocking. And I was like, holy shit, there's knocking? And she was like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, holy shit, you're listening to the graphic audio. And it was so good.
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually actively listening to my first series on graphic audio.
Yeah.
When I did a reread of Fourth Wing as audiobooks, I just did the OG standard narration, which I know are not your favorite, but they're fine for me. So my first graphic audio experience has actually been Zodiac Academy. And the first one, the graphic audio is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Because this book is like reality TV in audiobook format.
Interesting.
It is just crazy. And there is like a magic system and all this stuff. So like there's dragon wings flapping in the background or like fire burning. Like it's fantastic. It's super well done. It's a super immersive experience, but I have heard, and I have not fact checked this, so correct me if I'm wrong, that graphic audios miss out on portions of the books. Like a regular audiobook is a direct narration of what is written on the page. Graphic audiobooks are adapted narration, so they're not every word in the book.
Okay, so what you're saying is, let's say in the book it says, Violet, I heard Taryn flying out my window, and instead of that you hear...
Sure, yeah, but I've heard that in certain books there are actual like paragraphs missing because they don't function well in the graphic format.
Holy crap.
So I'm trying to think off the top of my head which one someone was complaining about. It was one of the 3 Fourth Wing books, but anyways, I'm curious to try maybe immersive read a graphic audio and see how much really is missing.
Interesting.
Because I look at something like Red Rising has a graphic audio.
Right.
I've only read the first one. Red Rising is so crazy in-depth and intuitive to read that if you were missing whole paragraphs of stuff, it would alter the story. Correct. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to picture graphic audiobooks negating sections of text just because they don't function well in the graphic format. It's a tough sell for me because I would rather get a standard audiobook that has the whole story than a graphic that might miss things.
Do you think it could also be with the fact that if they decided to do a graphic audio on a specific book, if they didn't take it out, not just the fact that it wouldn't work graphically, but it would just extend it way too long? Like a graphic audio of Lord of the Rings might as well have been the movie.
Real though, it would be so good.
So good, but it might as well already have been the movie because of how long it'll end up being.
That's fair. I'm interested to see what the length difference is in the Fourth Wing. So, Fourth Wing, the first book, Fourth Wing, the standard narration audiobook is 21 hours and 22 minutes. The graphic, part 1 is 7 hours and 52 minutes. And part 2 is 9 hours and 22 minutes. So it's significantly shorter.
Weird.
Significantly shorter. So when you think about it, there's got to be things that are omitted for it to be that much shorter and also include sound effects and battle and all that sort of thing. For further investigation, I've just probed your brain with that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought. Because I hear people rave, for example, about the Red Rising graphic audio all the time.
Me too.
And I wonder if there's really that many differences between the two. Also, something like Lights Out as a graphic audio would not work well.
No.
Versus a high fantasy as a graphic audio works great. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a time and a place for graphic audio. And that time and place is mostly fantasy.
Yes. Because I think if, for Lights Out, the sound effects are too normal life. Because if you were to take fantasy, because things are made up, adding those extra sound effects make it feel more magical and different.
True, totally
so
true.
So if it was just like Lights Out and to be like somebody creaking on a floor, unlocking the doors, the beeping of spy cameras. You're just like, okay, but it doesn't add anything to it unless you're out here squeaking the bed and rattling of handcuffs and the yowling of Fred. Like, those things would be different versus horses trotting and fairy dust. I don't know. But
yeah, I think realistically graphic audio functions well outside of a normal life setting, like you said. So even potentially some crazy horrors would be great graphic audios. Like, I can picture some Stephen Kings that would be great graphic audios. But, like, romance that functions in a normal life setting, probably not the greatest.
Yes. You brought up Stephen King, and now, because I was listening to Mr. Mercedes, You're in My Tattoo, that would be super cool. Just, like, because it's a different vibe than Lights Out. Because if it was, like, the gun cocking or the tires of the car, like, but the narrator himself alone is so good. So I'm just like, yo, this is so vibey.
Yeah. I think it's almost like thrillers would do well in a space that's somewhere between a regular audio and a graphic audio, where you almost have like the horror movie jump scare style effect.
Yeah.
So something like a gun cocking, a floorboard creaking, a door slamming that isn't happening every second of every chapter, so it catches you by surprise. I think that would be really cool. Yeah. But a full graphic, like, they're locking the door, they're flushing the toilet, they're whatever, like, that's boring.
Yeah. Oh, that would be really cool.
Yeah, it almost has to function like jump scares.
Yeah.
Like, here, for example, Pen Pal. That graphic style audio that you listen to on YouTube, it wasn't just the narrator. There was creepy music and like paper noises and that sort of thing. That was great.
It felt very intimate. Like he was literally recording it in the night of his like a college dorm room, and he's flipping the pages of trying to write down all the things that people. It was creepy. Yeah, that'd be cool.
So I think there's definitely a space for something like graphic outside of the fantasy genre. But it exists in sort of an in-between where, like, Zodiac Academy has something going on in the background at all times. There's music, there's sounds, there's wind, there's magic, there's something all the time. Super interesting, super great, but that doesn't exist in thriller, in romance, in mystery.
Cool.
But the idea of, like, jump scares, I love that. I'm also a horror movie lover, so that makes sense. That tracks for me. I want to be scared.
I'm not really technically a horror, but that sounds like fun. That sounds like one that you want to read at one time speed because you don't know. Because if you just sped by it wouldn't mean anything.
So that's the interesting point that I want to make about the whole audiobook speed thing, is that if I'm listening to a single person narration of, let's say, a thriller, 2.25 is usually where I land.
Yeah.
If I'm listening to, let's say, graphic audio, I'm listening to the graphic audio of Zodiac Academy right now, I'm listening to it at 1.75.
Okay.
So that I don't lose the magic of the graphic, but it's still fast enough speaking for me to stay engaged.
That's my max normal 1.75. Because if I'm like, oh, this is the pace is a little bit slower, the guy's dragging, speeding it up a little bit makes me sound like you're talking to me, and it's just like so
in your ears.
Marcus talking.
I'm sure that's how my husband feels too.
That's just like a regular FaceTime call.
No, I can't tell you how many times in my life that I've been told that I talk way too fast. I cannot public speak because I talk at warp speed. So yes, I love graphic audio so far. Don't have a ton of experience with it. I think it's really cool, and I think there's opportunity beyond what I've experienced. I don't actually know if there's graphic audios done for things outside of sci-fi and fantasy.
I wouldn't assume so, because like we said, it doesn't fit for most genres.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember here too is that graphic audio is like, we're doing the whole Bounty, paper towel, Band-Aid for Band-Aid thing. Graphic Audio is a company that makes audiobooks. It's not actually the title of the format.
Yes.
It's just the most known version of those
Yeah.
more produced audiobooks.
Makes
I'm going to
sense.
look up Graphic Audio now and see if they have anything outside of the
But we
genres.
are both quite new to it, which is fun, which gives us the space to kind of learn and figure out what else we love. But in terms of audiobooks in general, like I'm picky.
I have another love for audiobooks that just popped into my brain when I was looking at genres. I absolutely adore a memoir or something read by the person who wrote it.
Like I said, that was my favorite.
10 out of 10.
I crushed that, yeah.
Yeah, like I listened to I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Mm-hmm.
That would have hit half as hard if she hadn't been the one reading it.
Yep.
It was phenomenal. So phenomenal. And listening to her recount her own story, crazy. So good.
Yes.
That's just an aside. I'm not usually a nonfiction person, but memoirs and stuff read by the people who wrote them, so good.
Yeah, I went through that phase. A quick little phase. Yeah, it was the Friends, Lovers, and the Big Trouble thing, Matthew Perry, and then I jumped to Talking as Fast as I Can from Gilmore Girls to Gilmore Girls by Lauren Graham.
Interesting.
So she had her whole experience on Gilmore Girls, which led me to read her actual, just like author written book, Someday Maybe, because she also read that. But that was fiction.
Oh, interesting.
But I just love Lauren Graham, so...
on the same note, Travis Baldree being the audiobook narrator
dude.
for Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bone Dust.
I'm not the reread type, but I'm in that world all over again because of that.
Yeah.
But that also just shows how he knows the characters front and back really well, so it makes
That's
it
what I was
even
going to
better.
say. There's something special about an author reading the characters that they've written. That is the only fictional book I've ever read that the author is the narrator for.
Really?
Yeah. And he fucking kills it. But he's an audiobook narrator first.
Whoa. That's a different path. That's crazy. Could you imagine Roxy being Jude?
Oh my god. Pitch that to her. She's going to hate us for that one.
Definitely. But that would be so fun.
Okay, so we are getting towards the end of the episode here. While we're yapping away about things we love, best audiobook recommendations. Go.
Okay, so I'll do a fiction, nonfiction. Fiction.
Doesn't have to be one.
I'm trying to think. I can't even. Like,
do you want me to go first?
Sure, go first.
Joaquin will agree on a couple of these. So, The Ruinous Love Trilogy by Brynne Weaver.
Okay.
Phenomenally narrated, great books. Love them. Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. We've already talked about it. Love it. Amazing. Phenomenal. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Freaking nominal audiobook. I am not a sci-fi girl. I think I really would have struggled reading that physically, but the audiobook had me sobbing.
Okay.
So good. I also really, really enjoyed the audiobook of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Kingfisher is unbelievable. Any audiobook of a book by TJ Klune, phenomenal. My first was House in the Cerulean Sea, amazing. I have listened to and then subsequently read every other one of TJ Klune's books that I've read. All of the Green Creek series, In the Lives of Puppets, Under the Whispering Door. I did them all as audio, and then I read them all as physical. Phenomenal. Would make amazing immersive reads. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I know this book gets a lot of questionable reviews. I feel like it would make a great immersive read as well, and the narration is super, super well done. Lastly, lots of Stephen King books. Love Mr. Mercedes. Love The Institute. What else have I done on audio recently? Salem's Lot.
Didn't the audio of Fairy
Fairy Tale.
Tale drag you through it? Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have
Yep.
gotten through it at all.
Yep. The audio, I will not recommend it because I didn't love it. But if it weren't for the audio, I would have DNF'd it.
Okay.
There are a couple of more that I have really loved recently, but I need to refer back to what I've read.
Okay.
Oh, None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. It's the main characters are doing a
Right.
podcast.
Cool.
And I think that book functions phenomenally as an audiobook because of that. I can't imagine having read it with my eyes, having listened to the audiobook first. What else did I really love? Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
And then Legends and Lattes, Bookshops and Bone Dust were absolutely amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's my not extensive, but
Jesus.
most recently read list.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, that gave me a little bit of time to think about things. So I'm going to immediately go off of, obviously, the Lauren Graham and Matthew Perry ones that I just mentioned earlier. I'm right with you with the Ruinous Love trilogy. That's given. Same thing with Legends, Lattes, Bookshops, and Bone Dust. Then, different than that, The Book of Doors was one that if I didn't listen to the audio, I probably would have DNF'd it. Because It was so difficult to picture everything with the amount of doors and traveling that it kind of was. Listening to it made it a little bit clearer, which I really enjoyed. How to Kill Men and Get Away with It was
okay. So
amazing.
You did the audio of that, and I read the physical, and I thought the physical was fucking amazing. So I can't imagine the audio.
Audio was so much better. The posh British narrator fit it perfectly.
Yeah, I'm sure that made it.
Yeah, it was so good. Hidden Pictures. Jason Rekulak. Rekulak, leaving that with you. I'm just throwing in the Twilights because I love Twilight as growing up, so listening to audios were fun on that one. We'll leave that one out there.
That's nostalgic. That's nostalgic.
So Light Lark audio got me, same thing, got me through that. Light Lark, Powerless audios got me through the books because everyone else was reading them, and I was like, fuck, I should read them, and everyone was like, you should, but I didn't like the physical as much. Knew I couldn't get through it, so the audio saved me.
True.
And I think that's it. That's the most recent.
Yeah. I remember you really struggled with Powerless.
I did. And I didn't cry at anything everyone else cried at. But like right now, obviously Lights Out, and I know that's going to be a top read as well. I love it. There's so many.
We have a lot of overlapping ones as per usual. That also is partly because we share Audible right now.
Yeah. Well, even without it, like Libby straight up, I'm listening to, again, Mr. Mercedes. Again, is going to be a top read when I finish that. Mm-hmm. For funsies, I'm listening to Game of Thrones. First, why? We don't really like him, but I'm listening to that. I have Zodiac Academy, the first and the second, sitting there too. I have Edge of a Collapse that I'm going to get into. I have the Atlas 6 that I'm getting into. So, and Children of Blood and Bone. Not even done that, but I love I don't know how to probably, like the African accent that the narrator has on this. Fits so well with the culture of the book.
I think that's a big point too to make about audiobooks is that there has to be a narrator character fit. Because I've read a couple of thrillers that I'm like, this audiobook narrator sounds like a third party outside of the story. Like they don't sound like they fit the main character. They sound like there's someone else reading the main character's story.
Yeah. Which
sometimes that's okay. But I much prefer, for example, Jacob Morgan, Josh in Lights Out. He feels like he is Josh.
It needs to increase the level to make it feel more immersive versus...
Yes.
Because that's the reason why you're listening to an audiobook.
Yes. Okay, so on the topic of immersive reads.
Sure.
An immersive read is when you listen to the audiobook at the same time as reading the physical book. This is brand spanking new to me.
Same.
I did this with Quicksilver, and I shot myself down a rabbit hole. So I have now immersive read Quicksilver, Scythe and Sparrow. Oh, there's one more. Why am I blanking? Quicksilver, Scythe and Sparrow. Anyways, I've now immersive read 3 or 4 books.
The Lisa Joel one, did you not?
Oh, yes, that's what it was. None of this is true.
Yeah.
You're right. And I absolutely love it, especially with duet narration.
Mm-hmm. What about that one you just bought the book of, Pine of something something?
Between the Pines? No,
yeah.
That's an indie author.
But that wasn't audio?
No.
Oh, you just crushed that book, period.
Yeah, I just crushed that
okay. I was like, I thought that was audio. You immersive read it.
No,
because of the speed at which you just, No,
I just love that book a lot.
Okay, great. Love that for you.
So, highly recommend if you're somebody that has a hard time getting into audiobooks, because sometimes I know some people don't love the audiobook thing. Try an immersive read, especially with something with a phenomenal duet narration like Quicksilver, any of the Runeth Love trilogy, even Fourth Wing. Something like that. Probably fantasy, because then it makes your brain focus even more.
Yeah.
Highly recommend an immersive read. I picked up on so much more in Quicksilver, immersive reading it, than I ever would have just reading it with my eyeballs. Or just listening to the audiobook. Because I was annotating it as I was going, and it gave me the freedom to kind of keep listening while I was like highlighting things and doing my thing, and it was great. It was so great.
Jumped right to where it was.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I'm still trying to get into it, figuring out the actual preferred speed of the audio as I'm reading. Because like I said,
yes.
I listen to 1x speed, but I read at 2.5.
So yeah, that's the thing too, is I have to listen quick to be on pace.
I'm like really trudging along, which if I was really going to be like, yes, the audiobook narrator is great and the book is great, so I'll read it, then I'm running through it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to figure things out. And I feel pressure. I'm like, okay, I need to take a mental reading break. But the thing keeps going and I want it to stop at the same exact time. So I'm like, pause. I'm weird. So
you just stressed yourself out.
yeah, I literally just I'm giving it rest. I don't know.
I also think you have to immersive read the right books.
Yeah,
like I don't think immersive
right now is not.
Mr. Mercedes might be good.
True.
But I will say, like, I wouldn't immersive read a single narrator romance book. That's not giving me anything. That's not giving me anything extra.
Mm-hmm.
I would immersive read things that are either high fantasy, lot going on, difficult concept, whatever, along those lines. Amazing duet narration, or full graphic audio.
The last one I tried to do was with Leather and Lark, so.
Yeah, I did it with Scythe and Sparrow. And I really liked it. But I also think that you probably wouldn't just eyeball read Leather and Lark. Right?
I eyeball read Butcher and Blackbird, though.
Totally different vibe, though, than Leather and Lark.
Yeah. I think because I know how the level of banter is, I like listening to it more than reading it. So that's a little different. Because I like just being that third-party friend fly on the wall. Just to watch a relationship unfold like that. It's great.
Fair.
Same thing with Lights Out.
A camera on the wall, literally.
So, and because if I'm thinking like Alive Wells, if I'm thinking Out of the Woods, I feel like I like eyeballing more. I would eyeball more because I'm also on the side of, like I've told you many times, like, oh, I just like stop listening, even if it's at 1x speed. I just stop listening and then I lose the book. So there's some that I'm just forcing myself to have to read physically with my eyeballs.
That's fair. There's a time and a place for everything, especially when it comes to immersive reading. Like, pick carefully.
Yeah, so that's why I'm listening to a lot of audios. Yeah, because I go out a lot. That's most of the time when I'm listening to audios is when I go out and I'm driving.
Yeah, we're both commute listeners, for sure.
Yeah, so it's hard for me to listen to an audiobook at home because I'm always trying to do something else. But if I'm trying to be like, I want to read, I'm sitting down and reading versus sitting down and listening to the audiobook.
That's totally fair. That makes sense.
Because I like ambiance music more whilst eyeball reading, and I save audios for out there. So that's why right now when you asked me before we started recording, where are you at Lights Out? And I went, I haven't really left the house really, so I haven't had a chance to listen to it. But I'm reading Alive and Wells because that's my physical.
Yeah.
So I'm like...
Also, hell yeah, he's reading Alive and Wells. I'm so fucking excited.
Yeah, fuck AJ. Anyways.
Hell yeah. And that segues us beautifully into the bookish question of the day.
Hell yeah. So today is, what book might others be surprised to find on your shelf? Mine's easy. ACOTAR, the very first one. It's easy because everyone knows how much I don't like the book, but I have it as a prop for videos. But my real answer...
He also didn't fucking buy it. I sent it to him for free, so...
That's fine! Other than that, most of my stuff is pretty normal, except for, I guess, my romance shelf, really. Like, if you were to look at me and knew I was a reader, you would automatically go romance, because I recently just got into it. So, obviously, Rebel Blue Ranch, Ravenous Love Trilogy, Alive and Wells, Out of the Woods, Out on a Limb. Those are really... And then Roxy's on his own category. In terms of the romantic suspense is different because I'm there for the suspense. But if somebody were to walk in... Actually, that's funny. Last time my family was here and I showed them a house tour, my cousin's girlfriend was like, you have Fourth Wing? You have Lisa Jewell? Huh? You're a... And she was like, oh, I read those. And then my cousin goes, oh, so you're a spice reader. And I was like, no. But they automatically started not shitting on me, but like razzing me, and they were like, "Oh, you read?" Like I was like, "Fuck it, whatever. I'm here for the stories, boys." Like, but I guess you could say those just romanticy. I guess in general, they don't.
I think this comes back to a conversation we've had a couple of times on the podcast. Now, people would look at you as a dude, and be like, "Oh, sci-fi,"
literally,
and that's not what you read. For me, I think anyone who actually knows me would not be surprised by most of what is on my shelves. I think somebody who took one look at me would be surprised by the extensive Stephen King collection that I have. But to anyone who actually knows me, that's not surprising at all. I literally have Stephen King tattoos on my body.
Yep.
The actual surprising ones are probably, I would say, either the entire shelf of true crime or the psychopath-related psychology books that I have, because that's what my thesis was on in university, and it's still a big interest point for me. So, like Mask of Sanity by Hervey Cleckley, Without Conscience by Dr. Hare, those sort of things.
Yeah, because even me, I am like, whoa, at what you were telling me.
Yeah, it's definitely like a personal interest point thing. And I think, again, anybody in my personal life who's known me since university would not really be surprised by that. But like an outside perspective person, I think those would probably be the surprising ones. Mm-hmm. Although I do look like an elder emo, so the idea that I have books about serial killers and psychopaths on my shelf is probably not that surprising.
Right. So me is like, oh, didn't know you had an encyclopedia just on serial killers. But then me going, oh, you have an encyclopedia of serial killers. So it's like a...
Yeah. It's like one of those, I certainly look like a romance reader.
Not even really.
That's most of my shelves, quite honestly. And then I have an entire shelf of Stephen King.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think it's hard for me to think about it as surprising because I've been reading Stephen King the longest out of anything on my shelves. Like, I didn't read fantasy, romantasy as a teenager, really. I read it as a kid, kind of took a break, dove into Stephen King and horror and that sort of thing. Oh, actually, maybe my collection of Elizabeth George mystery books might also be surprising. Because it's an older mystery series.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning those to me. The one where it feels like it's one extremely long series because they're different books. Something
Yeah.
like that? Yeah.
It's all the same detective, but it's like a long.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
They're great. They're really great. And I have a signed one, so that's cool.
That's like me before when I was a kid, when my dad used to put like the Hardy Boys in my room to try to promote me to get me to read, but I was like, nah, boy.
I read Nancy Drew.
He did that too. He tried to do Nancy Drew too.
Yeah.
We had all the
I
hardcovers
read
and stuff.
a lot of like Nancy Drew and then Cornelia Funk.
That
Cornelia
also
Funk
rings a bell.
is Inkheart, the Dragon Rider, the Thief Lord, that author.
Magic Tree House was lit.
Now we're just into nostalgic books. The surprising thing on my bookshelf would depend on who you are to me. If you're an outsider looking at me, like, I think probably the psychopathy books from my education are the most surprising.
The most for normal people, yeah.
If you're an outsider looking at me, potentially the Stephen King collection. If you're someone in my life, none of this is surprising.
Yeah, no.
Actually, a shocking number of people are surprised that I love cowboy romance.
Not if she talks to you every day.
No, not if you speak to me, but like someone brought it up to me at work the other day and was like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And I was reading Between the Pines.
Yeah.
I was like, "I'm fucking obsessed." And they were like, "You read cowboy romance? That's a thing?" I was like, "Yes, that's a thing, and I'm in love."
Yeah, guys. Have you met Teddy? Gross. You guys are weird.
This one off the rails.
Why would you not love?
This one off the rails.
Well, if you guys have made it all the way to the end of this episode, we love and appreciate you. You guys know exactly where to find us. We have stretched our little podcast limbs out, and you can find us on Amazon Music. We are finally on Apple Podcasts. We are on Good Pods. We are on iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and God knows what else.
Honestly, let us know if you find it somewhere else, because that'd be hilarious.
That would be so funny. That means our RSS feed went out the window.
Honestly, we still don't know what an RSS feed is.
We're just putting things everywhere, yeah. So wherever you do your listening, you can find us there every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And we would love to hear your opinions on audiobooks and what your favorites are. We would love some recs of great audiobooks that you have listened to recently. Come find us and give us all of your opinions.
Yep, absolutely.
And on that note, bye!
Bye!